Hi there, and welcome to the Educators Corner podcast, the show that brings you conversations with educators from all over the world. Conversations where we stay curious for a little bit longer about the issues, challenges, and opportunities which we are facing in our schools and in our communities. Leisa Grace, are you feeling a little bit out of your comfort zone? Because normally you're the person asking the questions.
Yes, it is strange to be on this side of the podcast mic. I'm normally the one saying, "Hi, welcome to the podcast."
Okay, well, it's absolutely fantastic to have you on the show today. And we're going to be talking about teaching on the beach in the UAE. We were thinking, if you're sort of maybe in the UK or another part of the world and you've heard about Dubai or you've heard about teaching in the UAE and it sounds like the streets are paved with gold and this is a wonderful opportunity, we thought we'd explore what teaching on the beach or teaching in the UAE is actually like. And Leisa Grace has got a lot of experience of that. What we're going to explore today is teaching in the UAE really all about brunches, sun-soaked beaches, parties, and tax-free salaries, as some media outlets would like to suggest sometimes? And what's it really like to teach in the UAE? And finally, how might teachers coming to the UAE find support during their first few months? So to answer these questions, we're joined by Leisa Grace Wilson. She is an expert in the Middle East. She's editorial director of Teach Middle East magazine, and many of you will know her also of the host of the Teach Middle East podcast. So fantastic to have you on the show, Leisa. Let's jump straight in and get curious about Leisa and the UAE. First of all, tell us a little bit about how you came to be a leading voice in the Middle East education landscape. What brought you to Abu Dhabi in the first place?
So I came here in 2010. I was recruited by North Anglia Education to work in their PPP program, which was a reform program for the government of Abu Dhabi. So we were sent into schools to do a lot of curriculum work, a lot of training work with principals and teachers right across the Emirate, from the western region all the way to the farthest part of the eastern region of the Abu Dhabi Emirate. And I did that for 2 years, going into the nooks and crannies, all the schools, helping to rewrite the curriculum, helping to set up the schools. There was a team of us. There were people from New Zealand, Australia, the UK. There were companies involved, like obviously North Anglia that I worked with. There was CFBT, there was GEMS. I think there might have been one other that I'm forgetting. But the job was really to help to move their education system a little bit forward. I wouldn't want to say modernize because that's a very tricky word, but I think it's just to work alongside them in the reform that they were working on. And I did that for a couple of years. And then in 2012, I did actually go back to the UK, but I didn't stay long at all. So I went back to the UK and gave birth to my boys. And I thought I was going back permanently. So I went back, started to think about getting my house back, which I had put on rent to come out here. But in the middle of doing that, I got called back by the Abu Dhabi Education Council to work directly for them this time, because they were building these big schools, what now are charter schools. So what now they're called charter schools. And they wanted principals from the western part of the world to come and lead these schools. And so I was given one of those schools to lead along with my Emirati counterpart. Big school in Al Ain, still exists. Al Shaheen School, huge school, over 1,000 students. Poor little old me running that. So I did that for 5 years. I was the academic head of Al Shaheen School. And so, yeah, that's what kept me in the region for so long.
What role had you left in the UK?
Oh, I was AP head of specialism for a language college, so Parkview. Shout out to Parkview. And so I was in leadership in the UK and left that to come over here to do the advisory work.
So you're a head teacher, then academic principal for 5 years. Just tell us one thing that you really liked about that role.
My teachers, I really loved working with the teachers. Like it was, I'm not going to make it sound like it was all roses. There were some challenges there, but it was just really good to work with the teachers. The staff made it just the most magical place to work, even with the downs. And you know what's crazy? What I really enjoyed about this, I had boys and girls, all Emirati, and the Emirati boys were my favorite. And I know that's probably not going to be the most popular things. I enjoyed them. They were funny and they were fun. And they would come to my office and be like, Miss Lisa, guess what I bought? And then I'm doing the voice, which is not good. But they would tell me the most amazing stories. And I had a great time with them. So the two things I would say I loved the most were working with the teachers and the Emirati boys.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think it really makes a difference, doesn't it, when you're working in a school or any organization and you're really enjoying working with your colleagues and also, in a school working with your students. So you're not in a school anymore. So what, Miss Lisa, is your current mission in education?
Currently, my sole, I guess, purpose is to create a space for educators, whether they're in the private sector, with the government, wherever, to connect and to grow. Because you're really, when you come, as we will talk about a little bit later in this podcast, when you come here, you get to realize that you're out of your depth a little bit. You're in a new environment. You have to almost recreate your career as an international educator. What does that look like? Where do you go to for support? How do you showcase your talents? How do you grow your network? So our platform, Teach Middle East, is the place where you can go to grow your network and to connect and to tap into resources that will help you to almost build a brand new career here in this region.
Let's imagine that you're in London, you're in Manchester, you're in Birmingham, you might be in Lincolnshire, you might be the northeast, the northwest, the southwest, the southeast, you might be anywhere in the UK, and it's January, and the weather's not very good, and you're halfway through the school year nearly, and you're wondering if there is a different experience somewhere in the world for you as a teacher or maybe a school leader. What do you think aspirant teachers to the UAE often think is the attraction of the UAE? What's the perception, do you think? What's a typical perception of the UAE for teachers in the UK?
Well, if they're looking on Instagram, I think they think it's like sunny weather, their beaches, their brunches, their fabulous hotels, fast cars, nice access to flights to go all over the Middle East and the Far East and Africa, and it's just a jet set lifestyle. This is what Instagram shows. I have to be honest. If you scroll through Instagram and hashtag living the life in Dubai, hashtag Habibi come to Dubai, this is what you see. Now, is that the reality? We can talk about that.
Okay, so let's go back to 2010, I think, when you first arrived or before you came out. Can you remember what your perception of the UAE was? What did you think you were coming into?
Well, I wasn't coming to Dubai, so that's for sure. And I thought I was like coming into, to be honest, I thought I was going to a place that was a little bit backward, and I really thought it was somewhere that wasn't as developed. And it's only when I started to do my research I realized no, it's quite a modern place, and there are quite a lot of things going for it. Of course, it's a young nation, a young country, but there's a lot going for it. But my initial thoughts were almost like a tour of duty. I'd go and do my 2 years and I'd be out. That's what I thought.
The number of expats, including ourselves, who've said, well, I'm only going for a year or two. And here you are 14 years later and you're still there. I mean, I came out in 2011 and I thought, yeah, I'll go for a year or two. I mean, you'll hear that right. And I think maybe that's a sort of security piece we try to reassure ourselves, because it is scary, isn't it? I think when you think of making that move, however attractive it might seem. It's a really big change in your life. And so I think a lot of us appease ourselves by saying, well, I'll just go for a year or two and then I'll be back. So that's very common as a strategy to reassure ourselves it's not going to be forever. And I guess we're probably a bit worried about what we are going into. So you've talked a bit about the perception, brunches, sun-soaked beaches, party town Dubai. I mean, let me stop there. As a geography teacher, do we need to just explain a little bit to listeners in the UK about the difference between Dubai and the UAE? Or what is Dubai and how does it sit within the UAE? There's a little geography lesson there, which I think might be worth. And you've also talked about Al Ain and Abu Dhabi. So, do you want to just explain briefly what the UAE is, Leisa?
Yeah. So the UAE, unlike everybody's sort of Instagram perception, is much more than just Dubai. Dubai has done something fabulous. Dubai has done a fantastic job at public relations and advertising. So a lot of people know about it because of the buildings and the amenities, etc. But the UAE is made up of 7 emirates. And Abu Dhabi, where I live, happens to be the capital city and the largest emirate. But it isn't as glitzy. It's a lot more grounded, a lot more real. And alongside Abu Dhabi, there are the other 5. I mean, alongside Dubai and Abu Dhabi, there are the other 5. There's Ajman, there's Sharjah, there's Al Quwain, there's Ras Al Khaimah. And so when you think of the UAE, really, you could be going into any of these 7 emirates. The problem is you cannot judge Dubai, you cannot judge the whole of the UAE by Dubai. Dubai is a big modern city with people from all over the globe, and it's done fantastically well because of its tourist attractions. But places like Al Ain, where I used to live, is a local city. The majority of the people who live there are local Emirati people, and the lifestyle there is a lot more of what you'd find maybe in a rural town in England. So that's sort of the difference there.
What I think you are starting to describe there is, so you need to be careful if you're applying for a post in the UAE. If you apply for a job in Dubai and you live in Dubai, that could be very different if you applied for a job and you live in Abu Dhabi. Would be even more different if you live in Al Ain or Sharjah. So first of all, if you're thinking of applying, the UAE is not a homogenous area, even though it's a relatively small area. I mean, I speak to quite a few people who say they love going to Dubai, but they much rather live in Abu Dhabi,
Yep.
for example. Okay, so we've talked a little about the geography there, and then also about the perception. Tell us a little bit, Leisa Grace, from your experience, and you've got 14 years now of experience of living in Abu Dhabi. What's the reality of this life for a teacher in the UAE?
It can be what people perceive it to be, the sun-kissed beaches, the parties, the brunches, all of that, but that won't be very long term. The reality is that it is not a holiday. It is hard work. But it also depends on how you organize yourself and how you organize your time. So yes, you will have opportunities to experience some wonderful things that you probably wouldn't experience in the UK. There are opportunities to do some traveling. There are opportunities to spend time exploring the landscape of the UAE. The different emirates carry different landscape. And also, because you're within the GCC, you could hop over to beautiful Oman where Kai is. You can be going to Bahrain, Saudi. There are those things. But what I wouldn't want people to walk away with is the notion that it's a holiday. It isn't a holiday. When you are teaching in these schools, particularly if you're in some of these these private schools, I'm choosing my words carefully here. You are not here for fun. They are actually going to require that you bring your best self, because the fee-paying parents require you to be your best selves. This isn't a government-run institution, and even if it were, they would still require your best. And you are going to work for every single dirham that you get on that paycheck. So yes, there are the chances for you to go out and have a good time. And you might find even that your work-life balance is better here. But you cannot kid yourself in thinking that you will not work hard for that money. You will work for every dirham.
We do have, I think, right across the region, very demanding parents, and quite often in some schools, demanding school owners. And also, are there still annual inspections in the UAE?
So currently, Dubai has put a pause on inspection. So Dubai used to have annual inspections from the Dubai Inspections Bureau. Abu Dhabi does a once every 2 year, and the Northern Emirates once every 3 years. Now, what's happening is Dubai, with its annual inspection, did a pause for the 2024-2025 academic year. However, it is rumored that that will come back on board, but it will probably come in a different form, where some schools might have annual, while others might have it biannually, every 2 years, sorry. And so there are rumors, nothing is yet confirmed, but the inspections are rigorous, and they are of the standard that you would expect from an Ofsted, with a twist, because obviously they've got their own inspection standards here.
So sometimes we hear that teachers in the UK, they're getting frustrated with education, being a teacher in the UK, because of the accountability system. So that if they're moving to the UAE, they can expect, sounds like, at least an inspection every 3 years, and in some cases it might be annual. So that's definitely part of the landscape, and the expectation, the high expectation of parents and boards and governors are still very much going to be there. So that accountability piece uh, is still part of that experience. What I'm sometimes hearing about is turnover in some UAE schools, and apparently turnover in some schools can be up to 50 or 60% in any one year. That sounds quite high. Is that your experience, Lisa?
It is. So I haven't seen the 60% yet, but I have seen upwards of 45, 50%. So we let me give you a little background. So we do a database. At Teach Middle East, we run a database of educators in schools across the GCC. We're talking about school leaders. By the way, Kai, shout out to you, because we haven't had to update your stuff in years. So it's good. So we have all the schools in our database, and every September we clean the database. So we check who is the new principal, who are the new senior leaders, da 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 da. And some schools, the change is so massive, we have to clear out the entire senior leadership and put new names and new email addresses in there. It is that wild. The turnover is concerning. And it's concerning not only because people leave, it's concerning for, and I can speak about this because I'm unattached, it's concerning for job security. If you're coming out here, I want you to know that your labor rights that you enjoy in the UK are not the same. And you can be fired for things that in the UK would not be fireable offenses. So be very aware that you must toe the line quite carefully. A lot of this turnover is not just voluntary resignations. A lot of it is termination as well, and not renewing contracts, and breaking contracts, and messing with the terms and conditions of contracts, and people having to choose whether or not they accept the lower contract packages, or the change in contract, or reduction in package, etc. And so they opt to leave and find somewhere else that offers them something better. So the turnover is rife, and it's concerning.
Let's just try and explore that a little bit more, Lisa. So obviously, first of all, not every school is experiencing this high
Nope.
turnover. It's in
Let's just
some
know that.
okay, it's in some schools. In those schools where the turnover is like 30% plus, what do you think is happening there? What give us some sense of the context of which those schools are experiencing such high turnover?
So a lot of times when you hear of that type of turnover, it isn't one of those big organizations. It's normally maybe an owner-run institution. Normally, it's not always, there are anomalies here and there. A lot of times it's a change of contract conditions, or the salary is so low that it no longer works for the staff, so they have to look elsewhere because the cost of living is high. And then there are obviously issues where sometimes the school has to restructure because they didn't make enough profits or for whatever reason. So there's several factors that could lead to such high turnovers, but a lot of it has to do with salary expectations not being met.
What then we're really starting to touch upon there is that most of the schools which expatriate teachers from the UK will be going to teach in, yes, they will be international schools in many cases, but you're moving into a market economy. And I think the UAE is the largest market-driven education sector in the world, and it's
Mm-hmm.
and there are massive advantages with that, huge pros. I mean, it's very dynamic. I mean, you've just talked about your first few years in that experience, and the Middle East. One of the attractions is there's a lot of innovation. There's a lot of really positive change. Schools are exploring different ways of doing things in all sorts of fantastic ways. But you are now very much going to be in a market economy, and like you've said, not really going to have the protection which you might have had if you're working in the state sector in the UK, and that's a really big difference, which we just need to be, I guess, mindful of if we're
Mm-hmm.
moving into that territory. My first tip, we better know what you think, Lisa, about this, is do your research. Yeah, if you're applying to a school, try and speak to teachers who are
Yeah.
already there, or who have taught at that school. Do your due diligence, and don't just be taken in by the marketing and the adverts and so on. Do you want to add anything to that in terms of advice you'd give to teachers moving in?
Yeah, I'd say what you said, but I'd also say to them, try and reach out to someone who worked there previously. So kind of scour LinkedIn. Maybe they used to be there and they're no longer there. So they're a little bit freer to tell you what really goes on. But not everything that people say you should take as law. So you just have to be very careful. Do your due diligence, obviously, but be careful how much of it you internalize, because sometimes people leave with sour grapes and they're not going to say positive things. So just sift through. But it's always good to speak to someone who worked at an institution, because they would tell you a little bit more freely, I think, what their thoughts are on the institution.
What's also interesting, which would be different, which maybe people in the state sector might not think so much about when they're in the state sector, is quite a lot of these schools will have governing bodies, as you do in the UK. Others will be run by an owner, or they might be part of a school group. So there can be lots of different models of how these schools are owned and governed, and that can impact the culture in the school, both positively and also adversely. It can influence the leadership of that school. And if you take just on the leadership level, I know we've been talking a lot about teachers so far, but I'm told the average tenure for a head teacher in the international sector is 18 months. I don't know how true that is. So at nearly 14 years, and I've been 14 years here nearly in Oman, I'm quite unusual to be in one school for 14 years as a head teacher or as a principal. But very often that short tenure for a leadership position is because of a breakdown in relationship between the principal and the governing body, or the principal and the owner. So maybe that's something just to so not only talk to teachers, but try and get some understanding of how stable the leadership is in the
Mm,
school,
yeah, yeah.
because that obviously can set the climate. Let's talk about the money. We're not in education because of the money. We often hear, I'm not in education, the money is not that important. But at the end of the day, it is important, and it does play a factor in our well-being. I mean, I've been asking my staff recently to be thinking about their own financial well-being, and how we can support them with that in this expatriate context. So let's talk a little bit about the money that you might earn as a teacher in the UAE. And so the first thing we need to understand if we're moving to this part of the world is that at the moment, that you will be earning a tax-free salary. So that's important when you're trying to work out how much the salary in dirhams actually turns into. So my understanding, Leisa, is that in the UAE, on average, teachers earn somewhere between 9,000 to 15,000 AED per month. Is that about right, do you think?
Yeah, roughly, yes.
Roughly. So when you translate that into pounds, and there's all sorts of ways of doing that, but you need to bear in mind that's tax free. Now, again, my simple maths, when I try to convert that, that seems to me that that's probably not that different to a teacher's salary in the UK. Would you agree?
I agree. Yeah,
Yeah.
it isn't.
Unless you are able to work at a school that's going to pay more than that. And there are some schools, but not many that would pay more than that. So I guess financially, what then is the attraction of moving to teach a school in the UAE?
It's the package, though. So that's the
Right.
salary. And if
Okay.
you are lucky enough to get into a school that offers a good package, then your package includes medical insurance, annual flights home, and accommodation paid for. And then also, on top of those salaries, some schools pay you an allowance for extra responsibilities that you might take on in the school. And so over time, yes, it's the same amount of money that you might earn in the UK, but because you're not having the outgoings for those things that I mentioned previously, then yes, you end up taking more home. You end up keeping more in your pocket.
I guess maybe there's three big differences. If the salary is not that different, what you might find is different. If you've got children, you may get free or subsidised child places in a private school or an international school. So that would be a difference. You're probably going to get a housing allowance.
Hmm.
So if you're lucky enough to own a property in the UK, and let's say you rent that out, you're not going to have to be spending on accommodation necessarily in the UAE, and so you could be earning rental income in the UK potentially, um, uh, and you're also getting private medical insurance. Is that your experience in most
Yes.
contracts? So I guess we're coming back to that, I guess, same point again, isn't it? That you need to look at the contract. So when you're working in a state system in the UK, you might, well, a contract's a contract. It's pretty much standard everywhere. But these contracts can be quite different, and have a look at the benefits and really be clear about what you are going to receive for working and taking on this particular position. So if I then ask you in summary, Leisa, are teachers financially better off in the UAE than in the UK? What would your response to that be?
I would say lifestyle depending.
Okay.
I really would because you could, if you know how to mind your pennies, you could become better off in the UAE.
Yeah.
The fact is, it is an expensive place to live. And if you want to keep up with the Joneses, as they say, you will find that your teacher salary will not go nearly as far as you think it would. And there are many, many factors at play here. If you're not very financially savvy, it's easy for that money to fly through your fingers. It is also worth noting that there are two types of lifestyles here. There is the Western expat lifestyle. This is how I classify it. And there is the more grounded, I would say, Eastern expat lifestyle. If you go for a Western expat lifestyle, which involves lots of brunches, lots of holidays, lots of staycations, lots of expensive designer clothing, lots of nights out, lots of drinks, lots of, then that money will not last. If you go for a more Eastern expat lifestyle, where you might, you might enjoy the amenities of what's in your building for free. You might have friends over rather than going out. You might enjoy doing more sporting or free physical activities, running, walking, gyms, etc. There are ways of living that you can really see the financial benefits of being here, but it really does come down to the track you choose, the lifestyle that you choose.
Mm. I tell my staff, Lisa, sometimes that you can go from living a 0-star lifestyle to a 7-star lifestyle, and you can buy fruit and veg in some of the supermarkets really cheaply if it comes from the region, or you can pay ridiculous prices for stuff imported from Europe and North America. You can go to a really fantastic, let's say, Asian restaurant, which would be really good value for money, or you can go and spend a lot of money in a Western sort of style hotel. So yeah, you can make choices, and I guess the point is here that you need to be careful about this tax-free salary, and what I think we also need to bear in mind is that as teachers from the UK system, our teachers' pensions, the moment we leave the UK, are frozen. So if you leave with 2 or 3 or 4 or 20 years teacher's pension, that gets frozen the moment you leave the UK, and you can't do anything about that. It's just frozen. You don't lose it, but it's frozen. And so if you're going to be an expat for a while, then you really need to be thinking about how you are going to be providing for those years in your life, which hopefully will come to all of us, when you won't be working and you'll be in retirement or you'll be in semi-retirement. What provision are you making? And it's a lot easier to start making provision for that, the younger you are. And it's interesting. I mean, Mike Lambert, I'm sure he won't mind me saying this because I know he's said this publicly more than once. He's had teachers at his school in Dubai College, and he's just leaving that school at the end of this term. But he's had teachers who have been teaching at his school for, let's say, 10, 15, 20 years, and they've been on these tax-free salaries and this expat lifestyle. And after a long period of time, they have left his school without a bean to their name. And that is not a position that you want to be in when you end up leaving this part of the world. Okay, so financial prudence, financial planning is a really important part of this lifestyle as well. I guess something we haven't touched upon, Lisa, but I think it's also worth bearing in mind that when you make this decision to move abroad, there is a personal cost of living away from your family. What's your experience of that factor?
Ooh. Yeah, there is. And sometimes we don't think about it. Like, I really didn't expect to be out here this long. And now it's like I'm going to be out here longer because now my boys are in year 8, going into year 9. They're going to go into options, and we're going to probably end up being here until they go off to university. Then we'll probably follow them. But the personal cost is that you lose a lot of time with loved ones. We as a family, we try to go back to the UK every year, once a year, but it doesn't really replace it. Like, I have nieces and nephews that I only see once a year. I've got siblings that I only see once a year, and you miss a lot. You miss birthdays, you miss weddings, you miss life with your family. I recently lost my brother, and when I look back, I'm like, gosh, I missed a lot of years, and now he's gone. It's one of those things you have to think about. And I'm not saying don't do it because you want to stay and be with your family. I'm saying just remember that you're going to miss a lot of things that you wouldn't have thought about. My family do come out here a lot now because it's free holiday for them. They come and stay at the house and enjoy the beach and stuff, because we live quite close to Yas Island. So it's like they're literally at a theme park, right? But it isn't even a substitute for popping around the evening, popping around for Sunday lunch. It's not the same. You do miss a lot.
And I think maybe that's something else when you're looking at your contract or you're looking at the school that you're applying to. What provision allowance do they make, if any, for attending weddings of a very close family member, or if you have to return for a funeral, or is there compassionate leave? That's an important dimension, as you quite rightly point out there. The final thing I'd just like to touch upon here is the perception of the Middle East, of our families and friends, let's say in the UK. What is the difference between the perception of the Middle East, like the perception you get on the media in BBC, ITV, whatever news channels you get out in the UK, and the reality?
So, I mean, it's changing. When I came out here in 2010, at that time, my mother was alive and she thought genuinely I was moving to Iraq. Like, she kept telling her friends, she's like, I don't know what's wrong with this girl. Or when at the time, she thought I was moving to a war zone. And there's a lot of that because obviously there are places in the Middle East that are experiencing instability. And so, of course, the media does paint it as a place of turmoil and it places a place of conflict. And there are places like that. But if you're moving to, let's say, Oman or Qatar or the United Arab Emirates, it's a modern region. There are first class, world class amenities, lots to do, lots to see, lots to explore. So the narrative is catching up a little bit because the World Cup took place here, Expo took place here. So the light is kind of shining a little bit differently now than it was 9, 10 years ago. But it's still some work to do there. And the truth is, if you're thinking of moving out here, with everything that we've said on this podcast episode, just know that it's a very modern place. It's actually quite a good place to live.
It's modern, and what I hear a lot from my colleagues here in Oman, and I guess it's the same in the UAE. It's also a very safe place,
Yes.
very safe place, and many of my colleagues feel much safer in this part of the world than they would wherever they live in the UK. And I guess the other thing that maybe is quite easy to forget, but I don't know what your experience is, Leisa, but my experience being in school is I have never felt more respected as an educator as I do here in Oman than I did in the UK. I mean, the parents, while they have high expectations, quite rightly, when you meet them out and about in the community, they and their children are so respectful. Is that your experience in UAE?
It is. It is. And so you find that where, as in the UK, there is all this down talking of teachers, it's not happening here, and when a parent pays a substantial amount for school fees, they're willing to work alongside the teachers. They do have high expectations of the teachers, but they're also more willing to work alongside the teachers. And you're going to find that the students are a lot more motivated than the majority of students that you might meet in a UK classroom. And that's nothing against UK students. It's just that the parents out here more likely are professionals. They're more likely because they've moved, they're expats. And even the local community, they do hold teachers and the profession in higher regard than you'd find back home, I think.
So when you get that combination, which I think you do get in a lot of schools in this part of the world, you get supportive parents, engaged and motivated students, and talented staff. You put those three things together, and you can get absolutely fantastic places to work and to live.
Yeah, I want to point one thing out though, Kai, is that, and I know we talked a lot about what the negatives are, but this region is a great place to build your career.
Yeah.
I have seen over my 14 years teachers who've come out as classroom teachers and have worked their way all the way up to headship. So, and it is at a rate that is probably sometimes faster than the UK because they do get access to training, they get to do their MPQSLs, they get to do their MPQH qualifications, they get to attend lots of different conferences and networks, and they get to accelerate their career at a pace that they probably wouldn't in somewhere like the UK because of the level of competition and just the sheer number of people who are going after those opportunities. So it is also a great place to build a career in education.
When people used to go internationally, I mean, I remember some of my colleagues going off internationally, maybe in the 90s and the early noughties, and some of their friends would say, "You're going internationally, that's the end of your career." Or, international schools, they're graveyards of opportunity. And like you just explained, Leisa, there's huge opportunity for professional development in places like the Middle East. It's a rapidly growing education sector. It's dynamic, it's innovative. There are schools where you've got a huge amount of freedom to do things which you maybe wouldn't be able to do in other parts of the world. So I guess that then starts with when you arrive in the UAE. So let's say I'm a teacher, I've got my job at my shiny new school in the UAE. I'm arriving this September 2025. What can I do to make sure that my career in this new environment, which might be a bit scary and also very exciting, what can I do? Who can support me in this new educational landscape?
Right. So if you're coming out, there are quite a few groups that you should look out for and should probably, join. If you're in the UAE, then you've got things like Collab UAE. They're based out of Dubai. There is us, Teach Middle East. We offer a platform for educators. We're all over social media. You can't miss us. If you put Teach Middle East into Google, we're everywhere. And we offer, so for example, when we start the academic year, we start with a welcome reception and a teaching and learning kind of teach meet event. It's good. It's on a Friday afternoon. There is no work on a Friday afternoon in this part of the world, by the way. That's also a plus, Kai. 4.5 day work week, and in Sharjah, 4 day work week. So you come out to events and meet people and grow your network. And I think one of the things that you can do as well is to stay plugged in. So if you've never normally in the UK maybe used platforms like LinkedIn, it would be a good idea now to start using such a platform, start following educators, start listening to podcasts like, the Educators Corner, Teach Middle East podcast. What's Alex Gray's one? The International Classroom podcast and others. Look for them because they're going to give you the information that you need quickly at your fingertip. And they will tell you, okay, here's an opportunity here, there's an opportunity there. I think what you have to remember when you're coming out here is that you have to stay connected in order to grow. Your network is going to completely change from what you had at home. And so in order to stay plugged in, you've got to make the effort now to form new networks.
Absolutely. And then there are other organizations like British Schools in the Middle East,
BSME, yes.
BSME, COBIS, which is a global organization. HMC has an international division. So there's lots of organizations where you can get different perspectives and you can connect with teachers, with school leaders who are very willing to share their experience. So yeah, make sure you connect with this new exciting world because it's much more fun if you're experiencing this with other people, with other teachers, with other school leaders. And a lot of networks and opportunities. There's a lot of conferences going on. I mean, I think in the last couple of months in UAE, there's been a number of events. Like every single weekend, there's been stuff going on, and some of those are events which you run. Okay, so
Yeah, so I mean, we run quite a few, so yeah.
Okay, now you've got a couple coming up, so let's talk a little bit about those. You've got, I think, 2 or 3 events coming up in 2025 in the first 2 or 3 months. Do you want to share? Just give us a flavour of what's happening.
Right, so we start with the Middle East School Leadership Conference in February. That's February 5 and 6, and that's in its 6th year. So the theme this year, so every year the Middle East School Leadership Conference has a theme. This year, the theme is Leading Forward, Building a Leadership Legacy. And the conference is really about bringing school leaders together to look at how they're growing their schools, how they're managing, how they're leading their schools. And so that's going to be in Dubai at Al Habtoor Grand Hotel in the Dubai Marina. And you can learn more about that at schoolleadersme.com. And then in April, we're having the inaugural AI in Education Summit. And that's going to also be in Dubai in April 24 and 25. And if you want to learn more about that, just go to aiineducationsummit.com.
Okay. And that's just a flavor of some of the things happening in the region. And there's absolutely loads of stuff. So it is a really exciting, dynamic, innovative education part of the world. If you're thinking of coming out there, I mean, what we've tried to do, I think, is present a balanced view of what's going on. And so hopefully you have got some sense if you're listening out there in the UK. But if you want to know more, reach out to Leisa, reach out to myself, reach out to people on LinkedIn. It is a fascinating and exciting world to go into, but you just need to make sure that you're going in with your eyes wide open and you've done your research. Okay, Leisa, we're now going to move to the bottom line it round. This is our final part of the podcast today, where we're looking for concise and to the point answers. So if you've got someone in your leadership team or your team in your school, and they just go on and on and on, you can use the bottom line it phrase where you're saying, come on, get to the point, get to the point. So this is the bottom line it round. I'm pretty sure you're good at bottom lining it, but here's an opportunity to practice, Leisa. So we're going to ask you 5 questions, and we're looking for nice, concise, and to the point answers. So here we go. Question 1. Are you ready for the bottom line it round, Leisa?
Yes.
You sure?
I think so. Okay, I'm sure.
You're sure? Okay, here we go. Question 1. What's the biggest leadership lesson that you keep on having to learn?
You can't do everything.
That's really made me think, actually, of a quote I read recently. I think it's Gandalf from The Lord of the Rings, who says that in a slightly different way. He says, we need to decide how we're going to use the time that we've been given. And absolutely right. You can't do everything. Okay, number 2, key moment in your leadership journey that made you think or lead differently.
A staff member reported me for bullying, and I've never even spoken to her twice. And that made me think people will do anything to get at you.
Wow. Okay. Thirdly, your favorite way to unwind at the end of a busy day as the Teach Middle East podcaster and editor.
Music, fermented beverage. Can I talk about that? And a bath.
Okay. And what's top of your playlist at the moment?
Oh, I'm loving Sean Paul. I'm actually going to go see him in concert. So I'm from Jamaican background and I love reggae music. And Sean Paul is one of my favorites and he's coming to Abu Dhabi and I'm going to go see him. It's going to be fun.
Wow. And that's maybe something else to point out, that there's an increasing range of performers, like global performers, coming to Abu Dhabi, Dubai to do concerts and things. So wow, Sean Paul coming up 2025. Great stuff. Okay, leadership is
serving others, serving them well.
Absolutely. Leadership is about service. And finally, the purpose of education should be to
open minds and stimulate curiosity.
Superb. Very profound and to the point. Leisa Grace, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us on the Educators Corner podcast today. And also, I want to thank you on behalf of the international community, the education community right across the region, what you do for us through your podcasts, through your events, through your publications. You do help connect us. You help us think. You help us make the experience for our students in our schools even better. You do an absolutely brilliant job. We love you, and we really look forward to connecting with you and seeing you again in 2025. So Happy New Year, and thank you for today and everything you do for us.
Thank you so much, Kai. Thank you so much.
Okay, take care. You've been listening to the Educators Corner podcast, the show that brings you conversations with educators from all over the world, the podcast where we stay curious for just a little bit longer. The Educators Corner podcast is hosted by me, Kai Vasher, and produced by Stuart Pardoe, Zoe Snell and Marion James, and by BSM BSS Productions.